So I thought I'd make a video on some topics that were needing to be discussed. It can be very benefiting to some people, but I think that it's just important for me to make this discussion. What my ideas are probably helps all around the psychologist to come up with whatever it is that they're fixing, because it's all lost. I'm 40 years old. Whatever it is that's happening in the future, what my predicament in their life is, it's important for me to do something for Frankie and for my mother, for whatever it is that I think that God could participate in this in whatever which way by me sharing this information to the professional psychologist. And some of it is not related to helping. Some of it is like the story I'm going to talk about first, before I get into talking about the woods, is my grandpa's picture. Now, it's very difficult to, because it's my word versus no historical, and you also deal with the fact that it's very easy for me to be in a position to then try to cater myself to this type of buffet of a benefit when this person is no longer alive. And I'm talking about my grandpa holding me as a baby. He's a World War I veteran. He actually was someone that held a gun, and I don't know what his stories were. You might have been able to get them from like my Uncle Richard or a few other relatives that could have told you every bit of information that they could possibly think of to tell you what really went on. And I do know that that's what happened with that situation. That they could tell you, I remember hearing about, he saw somebody get shot in the head or get like a mohawk, and his helmet protected him, and he said something like the bullet like ricocheted off his helmet, and it just like dinged him, and it just like scraped or something on his head. It was some story like that I remember hearing. But he was a World War I veteran, and he was the real deal. And then he went to work for 40 years, over 40 years, I think it was like 40-something years in Ford Motors. So he was a painter and airbrush painter. But I think it's important for me to say this because in this photo, obviously, the whole situation of him dying, and it did attribute to what had happened in that house. I mean, right when me and Frankie left that house and the whole raping incident happened, he died, and my mother had me go into the room, and he was dying, and I was there by myself, and I could see the ventilator machine go. And I could see it to the right of me, and the machines keep him alive with a tube in his mouth, and he was just not moving. And I talked about the whole situation before. I talked about the situation before with my head, with him. Passing away is a long time ago. He didn't do anything. He really adored Frankie. He really adored Frankie. I really didn't get to know him very well, very much. I don't know why he wasn't home for that period of time. He could have gone on a vacation trip. I don't think he took a vacation, because I don't recall him being a vacation type person. He was family very oriented. Everything he seemed to do, he seemed to do it very general. Like he just get up and, all right, I got to do it. Like at 90 years old, in his mid 80s, I remember being just a kid walking through his house, and he was in his late 80s at this point, and he was like general, like, hey, bust it. He's very quick, like, and he was like, you could tell he's military trained, but he was just like, the mentality of that period of World War One was even more different. Was even different than World War II, but they're very closely bonded to one another, because during that time people survived very differently. Okay, there's no TV, and my father, who raised me, there was no TV until he was 9 to 10 years old or something like that. He told me the TV was invented when he was a kid, and he had to wait a couple of years, and said he was very lucky. He said he was very lucky because his dad could afford, getting a nice TV, and they used to listen to the radio. Richard might be able to tell you this, but he was really very young. Richard Lobo out in New York. And the reason I say this is because I think this plays a tribute to so many other things that hopefully I'm not able to explain while I'm talking about his his character, what had happened, and how you can relate sort of this molded, painted picture to how what a picture I'm talking about, of what he's holding me as a kid. So, y'all know most of the stories, I think I've already said, but I want to get to the picture, photo that I'm talking about. And when he's holding me as a baby, I know it's hard for people to think that I don't remember that, but I do. And there wasn't anything in front of that picture that startled him. There wasn't. And because the way that he's sitting like looking at the corner, sort of toward the window, and there was no commotion or anything. My mother was wanting to take that picture. So when he had me in his arms, he looked at me and he goes, like, he's sort of like, and I'm not sure how that's just related to, like, I got to take care of the babies, I got to go back to life, to taking care of things. And I think it's this sort of platoon sergeant mentality that was just common in a character of a person like that, because you have to be an extremely work ethic person to hold the job for 40 years during this time. Now, 40 years being a painter at Ford Motors, not only would have been very difficult to get that job, but there wouldn't have been to work at that company, but there probably would have been, and this is during the Depression, this is during a time he was raising a wife and like 7 or 8 kids in a house, and he was the sole provider of all that. He used to come home drunk. My dad used to tell me that they used to get really scared. He said my dad told me this when I was a kid, when he was really old, and he told me, he said that it would really scare him when he would come home drunk and he would beat up on his wife, his mom. As far as when it came to him paying the bills, he went to work. That's something he did do. So, I'm not saying he's a monster. I think that we all make mistakes. It's just a different era. Like I said, different phase. The phase that I understood is different. So, but this was continuing the story with my grandpa, Joe. And so the World War I veteran, he, in this photo, he looks at me and he's like, and I don't know if because he looked at me, I sort of charged his batteries up or whatever it was, or there was some just sort of eureka moment for him. But he was very proud to hold me, because my mother, I remember, my mother was very willing and very willing to say, yeah, hold the baby like your family, like, because she knows that, not only you get to hold the baby and contribute to that, but you're an old man and I'm trusting you with my child. So this is a very different mindset that I believe that's very different from the culture that nowadays it kind of is, because you have all this money, you're very educated, and you're from this country. My mother's an immigrant to an old man, and my mother had already had God knows how many children and taken away from her to disappear. So my mother does use this method to sort of create a more loving bond. Like, and I remember how she would talk. How she would talk toward my grandpa. It's like, oh, sí, mira, it's big for all of us too. So, given my grandpa, he was really old. There's not too many old people, really, really old, that get to be around old babies. So, to them, and especially for those that get to live that long, very many of us, very few don't, including me, probably will never make it to that age. But it's just probably a very powerful symbol for life in the cycle of someone's entirety, and the cycle of life, and what human life is. Because they say that your golden years are when you're in your 50s. You get a very good, well understanding to what it is in life. As when you get to your 60s and when you get to your 70s, there's different phases, I think, that are understanding to an all-around picture of human life, because we're all chasing for all these trophies and all these things that we want, but it's sort of to work together to keep the human existence to happen. There is always separation that's going to happen, and we all know we're all mortal. We're going to die. I don't care. Whether you try to fetch it out within the psychic medium for a security, or a church and smuggling your abusive ways to then give everyone the finger on your way out the door before you die. You know that you just don't want to stop continuing, and if there is something, you want to have it to continue to a beautiful place. And a lot of people tend to do that very cheaply, and also a lot of people tend to do that because the lack of learning and evolving of the world in different directions. But one thing is for sure, since the beginning of humans, we are born to the world from uterus. We all are. Gay, straight, transgender, 4 arms, 4 eyes, and 4 legs, and 8 shoulders, 4 ears, 2 noses, all kinds of. There is a birth to what the existence of a heartbeat is, or that activity in the brain, consciousness, whether it diminished to none, and then it dies. Whether 6 months, 100 years, 140 years, it ends. But anyway, I know he was very delighted. He was very delighted when he held me. I was a very chubby kid. I was really fat. I was really puffed up. And I remember that I still remember, being as a kid just chilling, and him holding me in his arms. And I do remember as a kid sitting on his lap, Frankie sitting on his lap. Never touched me or never did anything to me. But I think it's important because, God forbid Frankie, would have said anything, that he would have done something, because you never know the characters of somebody. But I'm just only speaking for the moment of what my life was with this person. Because my mother, I remember my mother gave me to him. She said, "Here, hold him for a second." My mother and father, I want to say, I think my father is the one that took the picture. And my mother, but he wasn't looking at my mother, nor was he looking at the camera when you see he's taking the picture. He wasn't looking at my mother. I remember that well. Like, he was kind of thinking, and he looked and he goes, he was just sort of like awakening, I guess. So that's what I have to say about that. Moving on to the next subject. This one is the story about the wooded area. The wooded area where Sarah, Frankie, and me were walking into the woods. Now, you can think what you want. I'm telling this to the psychologist or whatever evaluation you want to make. One thing that does feel contentment about my age is that I can't do anything about it. Is It's like I really can't. Like before, it's emotionally feels like it's burdening when you're young because you know you have your future ahead of you. When you lose that, like I did, it's just different. And it goes on to people that are 60. You know, some people, it's, you know, are real nasty at 60, 70 years old. You know, and they give you the finger all the way to the cemetery. They will not give a shit. It's just hurting because it's too late for them. They're so selfish and greedy throughout their life. That's all they understood, and then they want to be selfish again and gut someone else's life, like they did me, and like they did my mother. And they make excuses, and they know exactly. I don't want to go in discussions, you know. So anyway, so when we're walking, I talked about now what I'm trying to paint this picture as is this is about how I'm going to either relate who I thought Lucinda had buried a child in the backyard. And the reason I thought that is because I remember getting these images, impressions of her. Like I could see her, it was very confusing to me. Like, it was emotional to me. Like I felt bad for her, and I remember like I was a kid thinking of this. I mean, I was like 15 years old, you know, 14 years old, and I remember thinking this to myself. I remember thinking this to myself, and you know, I was just like I didn't even really know what to think of it. It's like I'm not trying to think of bad of somebody, and I didn't think bad. It was just like because I knew they were very poor. I know they didn't have a lot. You know, I could tell by the way they had their kitchens and how they just did things. It seemed like they lived sort of pretty poor. You know, like I said, like I wanted to say in this particular situation is now Lucinda and the Basili family had put a fence, a brand new fence, all around that house. John and I were, I think, 13 to 14 years old, you know, that somebody did that. Now, for somebody to have done that, it was a lot of money. It cost a lot of money to put a fence. And I think that they would have spent their money somewhere else. Now, I knew they had vending machines. They had like 15 grand saved up, and they bought it all with a bunch of vending machines and put it in their garage. And I don't know what the circumstances of what the story was. But I'm glad hopefully somebody intervened and helped that family and gave them what they needed. You know, but as far as I want to go with this story is because I don't know who got a hold of this information that could have then exchanged it against my mother and me later down the road, and that's ultimately what they did. So how I can relate this story, or how you can relate, or maybe the person was intertwining both of them just so that maybe they just intersect and then just size things up and be like, okay, I got it. And so they won't tell you that. So when this is also going to be related to the other story that I'm talking about now, is how I'm kind of colliding them together. We're walking with Sarah, Frankie, and Julian in the woods for a burial of a dog. Well, Frankie, I talked about this story many years ago, that Frankie and me, I walked home one day at night, and I did draw pictures of this, and I walked in that night, nobody was in the house, it felt empty. It felt like I thought somebody was in the backyard. It felt empty. It was too quiet or something. And sure enough, I saw a bag. I didn't see, Kathleen in the back corner, and I was like, and I saw, when I looked way far down at the very end of the fence, I saw a flashlight. My dad and Julian and Frankie standing there, and I mean, my dad, and I could see Frankie with just a shovel, just digging a hole, like he had just started digging a hole, and so what happens is I see a plastic bag, and I can't see it sitting on a chair, and I don't know what's in there. So I walk outside, I walk closer, And that's how I found out that Chapulín was dead. I walked over there and I just saw the dog dead, our dog, and nobody told me, nobody warned me. So I just walked over there, and he was dead. I mean, he was just hanging. His tongue was just, he had looked like he had just died within the last hour. My mother told me this. My mother told me the night, because I didn't know what could have caused this. I talked about this before because he was acting kind of weird before anything, and I talked about he had strokes, he had all sorts of things, and I did like the day because I noticed that we didn't know what was going on. He just seemed kind of very calm and or very kind of just like he was settling down for something. And it was unusual because that dog, still to this day, I've never seen a dog like this before. I've never seen a dog run like this before ever in my life. It was unusual. I think something was wrong with this dog, because this dog would run in the backyard and jog and jog and jog and jog for 10 hours a fucking day, 12 hours. You could see the tracks all in our backyard, and friends would come over and be like, "Holy smoke!" And he would just jog everywhere, all over the patrol the entire area, and then bark to scare off anything. You'd see him running through the tall grass when we didn't cut the grass at times, and he created his own pathways repeatedly. There was trails, all that he had created. And it takes a long time for a dog to be able to do that. And so he'd run till he had strokes or whatever. But anyway, I gave him some drops that were to get rid of some fleas. I think he had ticks, a couple of ticks, and I thought maybe this would help him. And I found in the drawer some drops, some flea stuff, and I put a couple drops. Hopefully this will make him feel better. You know, I don't remember. I don't know if it was from the grocery store or the vet, but it wasn't anything I knew could kill me. I mean, I think I was smart enough, but I didn't think it could have contributed to his death. It could have. I don't know. But I recall doing that the day before or day after, because it's like you have to put a couple droplets, get rid of fleas and ticks. And I think I did that either the first night and then he died, or the second or third day. I didn't do more than just 2 days. But we had him in the backyard for some reason. I don't know what it was. I don't think it was raining. I don't know what was going on. But anyway, I was gone, and my mother told me that when the dog died, the dog made a scream. Like, my mom told me that she was in the house. She was watching TV. My mother hardly ever watched TV. But she was just in the living room, or in her room, and she said she was in the kitchen. She was in part of the house, and she said that the dog just howled, like, oh, like howled or screamed right before it died. Like, my mom dijo que oí, pero di un grito antes que Chapulín se murió. Sí, Chapulín se murió y di un grito que se murió. All, like, he screamed before he died. And so it made me the assumption I don't know what could have caused it, whether it was stroke or anything, because the dog did have some sort of seizure problems. It was unusual, but that's what I remember. That's what the cause of death. He screamed at the very moment of death. And my mom was kind of startled by it a little bit, like kind of spiritually spooking by it, that a dog yell out, because the dog wasn't screaming and crying at all, and just right before the dog dies, it just screams and then dies. And I don't know what kind of scream it was, but the way that my mother described it was like more of a moaning howl, of a yell howl, shout, and like a death yowl or something. But it wasn't like a dog was like, oh, like, oh, like a dog is being hit with a belt or some shit. But that's kind of what happened. And anyway, they're burying the dog way down at the end of the house. So, Frankie's burying the dog, and I get down there, and I'm not in any tears. I can see Julian. He kind of seems like he has to feel like the one that has to show some emotion and cry, because none of us are showing very many emotions, including me. And we're pretty much like, well, that's it for us. We just got to do. This is what we do. It was very much like, this is the process of life. We live and then we die. We just do this to honor the death of our loved ones. And it was all three of us, my dad, and my mother was nowhere in sight when I got there. I don't know where she went. I don't know what, but for a moment I saw my mother in the living room, and she was just kind of like doing this, and I go out there and say, I don't care. And she did that. She didn't want anything to do with it. Didn't go outside. Nothing. I mean, she didn't. And she didn't tell me the dog didn't howl until after we buried the dog, a couple of days or something. She said it, but at the moment we're burying the dog, she didn't. I talked about this before. So anyway, when me and Frankie are out there and we grab the bag and we put the dog in there. My dad is, we're all staying there. I still remember how my dad was behaving, and Frankie was just kind of like, we're supposed to cry for the funeral, with Chapulín, and he wasn't like crying. He didn't have a cry, but he was just like, I gotta show some emotions. He kind of looked like he was kind of working up tears to have some sort of emotion, because we weren't showing any emotion at all. So, my dad just kept his head down, just kept on looking, just looking where he's holding the flashlight. And Frankie, said, we gotta bury him, and you gotta make sure it's real deep, because we didn't want any rodents to come by and dig up the dog, or maggots to start crawling up through the mud, dirt, and we didn't want that. So that's why Frankie was saying bury him 3 feet. We buried him 3 feet. I thought it was important for me to say this, because I don't know how this could have related to my sister being buried. And I know that sounds like you have a child that's being buried, you send up the Silly, or the Silly family. I don't even know. I hope to God that never happened. I hope to God that it happened. I'm not saying that it did, maybe, but, for whatever happened. But as far as how dysfunctional our family is, and how someone intervenes and plays police officer, does these things, it could be benefiting to the Kenneth Cooper, the Cooper family, to whatever the psychologist is doing with them. But I do know that one day, so now that this story's over with the burials, y'all know that my sister lived next door, and I talked about, she died, and she was just, I don't even know to this day where she's buried. I don't know who takes her flowers. I don't know who puts flowers there. I don't know, for the last 30 years just about 30 years of my life, had none of this. The last 25 years to 27 years that she has been dead, I don't know where she's buried, where this little girl went, nothing at all. Tombstone, nothing. And I don't know what had happened with that particular type of situation, but I do know that when my father died, me, Frankie, and Julian went to Sarah Cooper's house, Ken Cooper's house, and we went out there, and me and Frankie and Julian were just walking and talking, and we were just chatting about our dad. I'm chatting about figuring out what's going on with my mother, with the house. I'm just asking questions, up the ass like you wouldn't even imagine, left and right, frantically trying to get any source of information because it is too late. But these people will never know. My mother will never know the extent of my ability of being able to participate in representing and not having other people milk off of it. But it is too late. And whatever riches will become, they're gonna go on a suicide route. I'm gonna pay for it all, or I can handle it. I don't care. No, I'm sorry. They're gonna sabotage more. You can't give time. That's the beauty of things that happen in life. Is it's a cycle of life. Is that there's a beginning and an end to everything. And it's just that's the way that it was in this lifetime. As my mother used to always say to herself, in this lifetime, I am never going to be rewarded for what I have done in life. And there's a lot of people like that. We're walking in the woods, I'm 20 years old, and we're just walking this trail with Kenneth as well. And Sarah Cooper begins walking, and she goes, yeah, we buried the dog over here. He goes, yeah, we got the dog we buried over here when his dog died. And so when she's walking, she's like this, and then she stops, and then she looks over at me, like she's immediately accusing me. And I stop, and I kind of look like this, and I'm like, and this person is projecting a defense. This person is, I'm going to point you and get you. I'm going to show you how things are supposed to be. And it's very much this, because this person wants to think like Ken Cooper, the detective. Now, I think it's important for me to say this because I don't know. And I said, oh yeah, so she's listening to what this conversation is and everything that we're talking about. And one of the things that we go into discussion with when I'm speaking to her is we get to the open area, walking, and she goes, oh yeah, she goes, yeah, we buried the dog somewhere. Goes, well, where'd you bury the dog exactly? And I don't even know exactly. She wanted to point it. You have to look into it. If they even buried the dog there, she could have been making up stuff, playing detective again to clean up. But I say this because you don't understand how perpetrating it was for this dead little girl, my mother. In a sense, of a lot of ways, I feel like when my time is ready to go, if I don't say nothing now, I will pay for it. But I'm not here no more. But I think it's important because I couldn't be more honest about how everything played out. The psychologists are smarter than me. The president's smarter than me. His people are smarter than me. They're going to keep getting what they want. Nothing's ever going to change with that. No matter how justice of a person I am, that is never going to change because it's just not. They're going to keep changing and they're going to keep making this shit up. So I say this because, for me personally, I had no idea what type of detective work Sarah Cooper and all this perpetrating do this to a 20-year-old to a 14-year-old to do with Frankie. Sarah and Ken knew about Frankie being right. They knew from the very beginning. And what's very disturbing about this is that I don't think I've ever shared. I talked about this because it happened this before. I talked about a story that when I went to Kenneth's house one day when I was a kid, it's their old house. And I was about 6 years old, and Jillian had just been born. And Jillian was in the back seat, and I drew pictures of this. And when I went into that house, I saw Ken Cooper opening and closing the oven, and he was directly facing as he was suggesting about Miguel. And they were communicating about Miguel, and they were looking over like at Frankie. And I remember Sarah Cooper just looking at me, like staring, eyeballing at me crazy. And I saw Ken Cooper try to hide what he was doing, and I could see what he was doing. And the thing is that he knew about this when he showed up at my dad. So you can go on about Frankie, because if Frank is in a vegetative state, it's not going to change the fact that Madison and Kenneth are going to get it. But what makes this even disturbing is I want to get into. When I was at Kenneth's house, I was about 22 years old before my transplant. When I got to his house, this is the only time, it was very unusual for him to do this. He was cooking a pizza. And he specifically waited until I got there, and he literally made the same body moves and reactions that his father did, making a mockery and then trying to play uniform, trying to cover up. So when you're trying to manipulate and cover up something, is that you make it transparent so that people can't really tell what identity. And I'm just having my interpretation shooting my brain, beating the fuck out of me, so much abuse like they did. And you're going to get what white power is. It was steak dinner, at least you're 9, and I'm ready for the murder-suicide. That's the mentality that these people are going to get away with. That's why I prefer to leave this with God now, not just because of my age, because it's so far beyond that it's out of my hands, my ability to do anything about it. Like, it's so, for me personally, he's made, not only I found this out recently, 100% he's making a mockery. The only way that he could have ever known that, because he wasn't in the room, is if Sarah and Ken Cooper called him on the phone and told him exactly what they did when they were doing this situation by Ken Cooper and Sarah Cooper about Frankie being raped. Because they're trying to dilute and poison my mind to say they're trying to cover up. So when nobody knows about this and I'm the only video camera and proof of anything that's going on, they're going to want to shut me up. Because the cameras, Michael Jackson, Oprah Winfrey, all the celebrities, any money in situations they bleed into it. By the time you find out, you ain't gonna know shit. Here's Frankie getting raped by over 10 men, and it's glory for Sarah Cooper and Ken and that family. Why is it their fault? Well, the people also, you gotta think about who trusted them. That's what white supremacy is. That's how powerful white is. You're not going to get, it is, if you have stupids, my mother is a first grade education. You grow up morally very differently, even when you don't have the money and education. Your moral settings are much more stronger and better. They're not, oh, I'm moral compass very good and I also have money. No, these people, how they evolved in Cooper family was nothing but money. It was nothing but very cheap shit to steal and take off of somebody's table. It wasn't good. So, doesn't change the fact that my mother, I don't talk to my mother in the last 20 years. But wherever she is, wherever Frankie is mentally, now, I hope, and did this for God and did this discussion because the psychologists can rearrange to what they want. It is too late. And I think that it's important because I do know something that is going to happen for sure with this dead little girl. I don't know if I live long enough in society and don't end up in a surprise prison, but if I end up, I believe that at some point it's very likely that there's going to be some sort of ceremony of this dead little girl. You are just going to put that curse on me and waiting to put that water and that scolding on me. That's all that is going to be for me. That's nothing more than that. That is a sack of fucking shit that has been, they're just grabbing and launching it at me. That's, they're just grabbing their shit and feces like monkeys and throwing it at me. That's all that is. That memory, that experience, they're going to use the church. They already built the church. They're going to use supremacy. Oh, it's not about white supremacy. No, it's about gay. No, it is going and firing. It doesn't change the fact that you're putting a deceased little girl on me. And Ivan was there. And that's my biological sister. Well, how do we relate religion and God? Okay, well then I go to the church and I give it to somebody else. But you're not going to throw that shit on me. And that's exactly what's going to happen. And that's why I have to make this discussion, because it isn't healthy. It is beautiful, and it's a cycle of life to have a proper funeral and a proper burial for a human being, even if they weren't at the capacity of the glorious Obama and Michelle Obama and Ken Cooper and Sarah Cooper, or Richard Murphy and John Murphy for being a Marine, whatever it is, that we give human beings a rightfulness to a proper burial, to have a place for somebody, let alone your own brother, to put flowers or do something. Now, obviously, I wasn't in a great mental state, and that's why they didn't want me to do this. So, I believe that's very beautiful. I believe that we should. I believe that it should have happened a long time ago. But in the accumulation of time and money and all these things, all that brought was a curse to me. Because everyone, including Sarah and Ken, and especially Ken at the radio station, persecuted me and used that as a leverage against me and going to say it was detective work. It does not change the fact that people persecute me because of those, along with Miguel raping Frankie, along with my mother surrendering this. And that's just because I'm nowhere in safe hands by people just saying, "Oh, I'm just keeping an eye on you," because I don't personally know what the fuck is going on. And you have corrupt police officers. You can't trust them. The idea of it is that you have these people, they create a very chaotic environment, and you got to understand that these people then want to take matters into their own hands because they know in society how we communicate. They know because the police can't do nothing in some cases and isn't going to do anything good. So, I think it's important for me to make a discussion about that, because, I think that it's a beautiful thing, but that is nothing but a curse that has not only plagued me, but it's continued. I didn't get to say, well, I did this or I did that. I'm I'm finding out 35 fucking years, and no one wants to believe me how that life cycle environment that I'm in. I believe there was a part of me that could have put more effort into finding out, and I got so scared that I didn't even want to ask any more questions. And when I just slightly said something about the girl, I got scolded for it. Like, no, don't worry about it. Like, you don't understand that every time Frankie got raped, Hector knew about it. Yeah, Hector's just covering up. You don't, but it makes it look like that so much, because when I'm going into the smell, there's no blood on Frankie. Just because I see his eyes red, there's just a smell, and then looks like he's in anguish. There's no fucking discussion every time he ever got raped, other than my uncles. I mean, even when my mother moved to Mexico, you got to understand that, like, when I saw that rape happen to Frankie in Mexico, it was like that. I got scared, and I go like this, and I go, and I didn't understand it. And I remember being on my knees giving oral sex, to this poor soul individual who was very sick. And, you got to understand that they were very, small glimpses, because I'm so young, and I'm in an environment like I've never been. I'm scared everywhere the fuck I am in Mexico. Like, I'm fucking just scared. Like, nothing here looks like there's no police. There's, nobody, nothing. So, we see drunk guys and fucking just passed out, laying on the ground, like they're fucking dead right in front of our house. My mother, maybe that was the guy that fucking raped my mother, or this guy was probably connected to one of my mother. He had shown up to maybe rape my mother, and he showed up drunk, and he passed out drunk. And you got to understand that's how our situation was going. Because I talked about my mother got raped in Mexico that's how my mom got pregnant. So, I think it's important for me to say something about this, in this particular situation, because, you know, I want to practice more in the Jesus faith and God faith to have more balances. I don't believe now that it's all Sarah and Kansas as much as it was convenient for me to blame. It was other people that they're in power. You got to understand that people that are blonde hair and blue-eyed cowboy detective, people are always following those leaders. They're always looking for those types of leaders. It's very unusual. I've seen this with Anthony. I've seen this very well with Anthony and a few other people, but it's very seldom. Anthony is definitely, Vasily is one of those people. They just get gravitated to, like, and it was crazy to me, you know, like, you know, these people didn't know I was just some Mexican spick, Osama bin Laden, nasty black hair looking person, and they had no idea I knew this kid my whole fucking life, and I would just stand in the corner and just watch how these other strangers show up and talk to this stranger like he was a celebrity. And I approached and saying something to Anthony, and it was interesting to watch his behavior. I'm like, you don't even know Anthony, you don't even know this fucking guy. And he was like, you know, it was like talking to them, it was like best friends in their childhood, and they become defensive toward me, like toward him, to defend him, like I was intruding their circle, you know. And then I look at Anthony to see how he would behave, to see how his reactions were, and it was very weird. It was like a white thing, but you know, I think it's important for me to say this because I think that there is better for him to have gotten involved because you have some participation and some protection. Because if they didn't at all, what do you think would have happened? Let's just say they didn't do anything and they just shrugged everything off, like they really did, and just didn't take advantage of what they wanted and go this and that. What do you think would have happened? Who else do you think would have taken advantage of what? What do you think would have happened worse? I think it would have been better for them to participate in whatever little bit that was, in ways it was, because it would have set fear around other people and more control. Even if it was very cheap, you're shooting Michael Jackson and then Michael Jackson over there too, you know. But I think it's important. Nothing can be done about it. I do hope the best, and yeah, I do hope that the psychologist can get situated with this. You know, it's some disturbing subjects, and you know, it's something that you know, it is too late. You know, God forbid something happened to Frankie and nothing did happen, isn't going to change. You know, I'm not a very smart and bright person, but I think I'm enough of that brightness, a little bit of it, so I can find some explanations of my way out of this sort of dark place. And, you know, my light may be dim, but I think that's the best that I can do. It's hard because, you know, it really wipes the complete existence of what everything had happened. That house that you gave to my mother and her kids, and how celebrities got involved. It's horrific because that's all they ever did. They enjoyed their money and fame and don't understand the horrors that me and Frankie dealt with. Me and Frankie got left behind. We got left behind. Frankie especially did. So whoever showed up took advantage of him. I think somebody kidnapped him. I think somebody took off, gave him a number, and told him to go somewhere. And you know, the fact that toxic family members and a lot of people, what they did is they got involved and they turned their tables on me. You don't understand how vicious I was and how many enemies I was creating in my family, because I was like a growling dog at every fucking thing. Because I wanted to know the answers. It wasn't just about money to me. It was like I wanted to know what the fuck we're burying dead bodies and just throwing trash away, or what's going on here. You think you know what's best? What happened to God? What happened to the crucifix at the front door, the crucifix at the back door? What's going on here? Like, this is not a celebrity ride, and it still hurts me, it bothers me. I call Frankie all the way from Tokyo, Japan, and he's, getting tested in Tokyo, Japan for my transplant, and I come in and I bail out on it because I need him here, and I'm like, what the fuck is going on? I'm like taking myself sort of a suicide route by doing some shit like that, because I'm so pissed off. He did this to my. I don't know, like Frankie, feel like he frankly abandoned this situation. You do the same. You can do this to me. Well, my death is not going to go to the shithole like it did to him. Missing house, missing money, and everybody just took off. Somebody got to say something. We're not. Morally, it's just not good. But you don't understand. I don't even know what the fuck had happened to Frankie. There's no way. There's just too many people. The count is way over 10. It's just so disturbing. You don't understand. Like, I feel confident that the 60% that these other two guys would make it 12. That's only for what there had to have been more. Let's just go with the number 12. It was just oral sex, wasn't penetration. That's rape. In my eyes, that's rape. That's 12 fucking fully grown men. There had to have been someone else, at least one other fucking person. There had to have been. You just didn't know about it. You just didn't know. You didn't hear I was too young. Frankie never talked about it. My mom. Well, you don't have to give money to. This is not a celebrity ride to the top. But to stay comfortable, you're safe, you're fine, some therapy. We have Michael Jackson, the President of the United States, to balance. We're not going to ride his red carpet. We're not going to take nothing from you. You have a life. You have a life. There's a lot to deal with. We move on. But for somebody to, Ken Cooper and get the radio station over here, a brand new record deal with Head Crack, traveling the world, money, and I'm starving to death, eating in trash cans for food even as a kid, and only eating leftovers. That should be uncalled for. And I believe that my mother taught me what God was and who God was, and how we went to church, and when you're pleading for life, and how she used to always tell me the starving people of Mexico, the starving people of Mexican people, all the kids that don't have nothing to eat. My mother would literally point in the trash can when I would throw food, or when I did throw food, just like once or twice, because she hit me when I do that. Or she'd tell me, no. My mother would a few times pointing at that trash when I threw away food. And she goes, miras ese no te tiras. En México hay alguien que quiere comer esa comida y ni tiene nada para comer y tú lo vas a tirar a la basura. This is how my mother would be. And I mean, I had to eat everything bit on my table. We didn't throw food away. Like, you got served and you ate what was on your table, on your plate. So my dad was the same way. Like that, not just for fuel, but the idea that there's people that don't have in this world, but you have to eat. Make sure you eat everything you have, because God gave that to you. And it's good. It's good spiritually. I understand people say that, but I think that you see starvation in Auschwitz, you see starvations in situations like that. But to appreciate what God did give you. But I think it's important because hopefully you can put all-around picture of all this discussion I'm making about everything I'm talking about, and have a better paintbrush to make your paintings with. For a better canvas of understanding that's out of my brain's ability and out of my abilities to fix. But with this resourceful information, at least from my output, I think that it can be very benefiting. You can dissect what's useful, worthless, fix this a little bit with my mother, Frankie, fix this a little bit with Sarah, fix this a little bit with Ken, give a little bit more explanation to why Sarah did this or why Ken or why Kenneth. But for me, it is, if you're, okay, you didn't go, Kenneth at the radio station, he did not go through the troubles. You got to understand how they weren't a part of our life. To me, I can't express how scary it is, the audacity of a frightening manner, how this person thinks they want to take control of a dead little girl the way he did. My father's, how he stood in front of that casket, and how he's pretending to be using radio quiet is really cool, and how he's navigating just very betrayal, backstabbing, conniving fucking ways. That was very brutal, along with Sarah and Ken going along with this, because you're dealing with a dead kid. You have no idea. They think this is like it was a piggy bank. Let me find a piggy bank, clean up, and be hero again. I know what's best. They don't think and understand how well my moral compass was beyond theirs ever was. You got to know what hard work is. You got to know what, how my mother in situations that they don't even know my mother's mental state. They don't even know Frank is. Even if they're sizing me up, you don't know my mother's mental state. Okay, I'm going to put stupid over there and fool Hector over here. But anyway, this is that way the professionals can, whatever, it's take a couple more dollars over there, or maybe some understanding with Kenneth now, so that there is progress, there is healing, there is understanding before it is too late, and whatever it is. But I want to make some other videos on other topics.